As kids in Ontario get ready to return to in-person learning on Monday, a new poll is now shedding light on how parents feel about sending their children back to school as Omicron cases continue to rise. Some new data from the nonprofit Angus Reid Institute reveals more than half of Canadians expect to contract COVID-19, regardless of the precautions they take. And for parents with young children in school, that concern is even higher.
The poll also explores how Canadians feel about public health restrictions across the country. Joining us live tonight to break down the research is the president of Angus Reid Institute, Shachi Kurl. Shachi, thanks for being here tonight. Let's start with the number of Canadians who feel contracting Omicron is inevitable. I was actually pretty surprised with this number because I feel like at this point, everybody knows someone who's got COVID-19. Tell me about the findings on this issue.
Well, that's exactly it. So over the course of a 2-year pandemic, and we've been tracking this data basically since the spring of 2020, we know that people have generally had some level of knowledge, 7 degrees of separation, 4 degrees of separation around who they know has Omicron. Someone at work, someone on a sports team, someone from the gym or from another aspect of their lives. But anecdotally, I think we're all hearing these days about close friends, family members. It seems to be with everyone right now. And so it does not really surprise me that just over half of Canadians say, look, no matter what we do in terms of masking, in terms of precautions, in terms of restrictions, this variant is so infectious. It's just going to go faster than we can go. We're not going to be able to outrun it. So you've got a bit of fatigue, you've got a bit of resignation, and really people throwing their hands up in a sense and just saying, well, it's probably better if it's a milder case. It's better if we're boosted. It's better if we can avoid it, but we don't think we can avoid it at this stage.
So what about people who have young children, especially with kids going back to school next week? Do you see more people concerned in that age group?
Absolutely. So again, how many parents of young kids do we know who themselves and their entire household are down with Omicron right now? If you are the parent of someone who is in public school, kindergarten to grade 12, you are 2/3 of these parents across the country are more or less resigned right now, have just thrown up their hands and said, we think we're going to end up being infected with it. So that is much higher than the national average. And again, I think reflective of the fact that we understand that young children are the ones who are most likely to be carrying this disease and spreading it, this virus, and spreading it right now.
Let's look at that tied to safety in school. Look, kids going back to the classroom here in Ontario on Monday. Other provinces, they've already sent their kids back earlier this week. In your data, how do parents across the country feel about sending their kids back to school versus the mental health consequences of remote learning and maybe even the mental health of these parents who are dealing with the situation at home?
So it is so dependent province to province. I'm talking to you from BC, from Vancouver tonight. And of course, as you mentioned, kids in our province went back on Monday. Children in Ontario and other parts of the country are being held until this coming Monday, although up until recently, there were questions if it was going to be a little bit more indefinite than that or longer than that. It's interesting because in Ontario, you do see the highest number of parents saying when we think about that balancing beam and the way in which it balances, what's more important, ensuring the spread of COVID in schools is lessened or ensuring kids are getting as much access to their academic development, their mental health and their ongoing development as children. And parents in Ontario are a little bit more concerned about that COVID spread than they are in other provinces. But in either case, parents across the country are saying, look, both things are important, but if we have to lean one way, we are definitely leaning more to the side of keeping schools open. People have been at this for 2 years, and the disruptions, particularly for parents in Ontario, I think also have them at a point where they're saying, look, both are important. but really, let's please just get the kids back to school.
Yeah, we're hearing that too. Let's chat also about public health restrictions, right? I mean, how do people in Ontario feel about the closure of things like indoor dining? You can't gather with more than 5 people indoors right now. And today, Dr. Kieran Moore, our province's top doctor, is saying we don't know for sure. There's no guarantee those restrictions will lift at the end of this month.
You know, Ontarians, as people are across the country and really, you know, in all places that are affected by this, which is every corner of the planet, there is a combination of anxiety and, I think, fatigue. And those become almost competing forces that are putting Ontarians in a place where they're pretty divided over the intensity of restrictions. So you have almost a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 split in Ontario, where people are either saying the restrictions are about right, they're where they need to be. You've got a significant segment who are also saying, look, the restrictions go too far. And then you've got folks saying they don't go far enough. So in Ontario, you don't have a majority or a consensus view on what to do. I do think it's notable that about 2 in 4 people in Ontario are also of the view that it's time to just lift restrictions. And again, I think that comes from that sense of resignation, that sense of fatigue around we can't outrun this thing. Even observing restrictions has not stopped it. Of course, public health officials will say, well, no, it hasn't stopped it, but it's limited it, and we need to do that in terms of hospitalizations and ICU beds being available. But, you know, folks are just, they're tired, they're worn out. We're rolling into year 3 of this. It'll be in March, April of this year. And I think it is the uncertainty and anxiety of not knowing what's coming next, which leads people in Ontario and across the country to sort of be in very different places around whether we should continue with really strict lockdowns or whether just open it up and get it over with, which is something that a lot of people are expressing now too.
That's something I'm certainly hearing out in the field, talking to people saying, I think it's time we learn to live with this because it doesn't seem like it's going away. So that begs the question, will this pandemic ever end? What do Canadians think about that question, Shachi?
Well, they don't think it's going to end in 2022. I can't help but reflect on when we first started asking this question, and significant numbers thought that it would be over in a matter of weeks to months. In March, April of 2020, people thought we would absolutely be out of it by June of 2020. Now you start to see that a level of hopelessness or just a sense that we are going to be living with it over a long period of time. Even where some medical health experts are saying, look at what's happening in the UK, look at what's happening in South Africa, where the numbers spiked very quickly and then dropped off very quickly. Canadians are dug in and they're sort of in this hunkered down mentality where it's like, nope, this is going to be with us through the end of 2022 and beyond.
Don't you miss being that naive, thinking I'm just going to hang out on my couch, finish Netflix, have a couple bottles of wine, and we'll be back at normal life?
A couple?
We thought we had to have a pandemic project back in the day. I remember organizing my closets going, this is perfect timing. I'll just get my spring wardrobe done.
And I'm sure you've done it a few times since then
they were
as well.
No, now I'm just sitting talking to you in my pajamas.
Shachi Kurl from Angus Reid, really appreciate your time. Thanks for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.